G'day everyone, welcome back to Australia's Great Australian Yarns in the Australian Outback here at Adventure Life Oz. So tonight we are reading from the same book by Paul Taylor, Great Australian Yarns. And for the next several lives, we're going to be reading about cannibal convicts and the monsters who made them. Yep, that's it. Get excited. So there's going to be several yarns about cannibal convicts and the monsters who made them. And we're going to be starting off with a few friends for dinner. So stay tuned. Get excited. It's the first time I am hearing it and reading it too. So let's go on a journey together. A few friends for dinner. Man's flesh is delicious, far better than fish or pork. Alexander Pierce. Alexander Pierce was unique, the only man to escape twice from the nightmare penitentiary Macquarie Harbour. He was Australia's first recorded serial killer, and he was that rare monster, a man-eater, a cannibal who relished human flesh. Pint-sized and pockmarked though he was, Alexander Pierce's only known likeness show a slight, fine-featured young man with tousled hair, a stubborn mouth, and a pugnacious chin. Today he might be manning a call service or have a walk-on role in Neighbours. More likely he would lead an anonymous life of unsuccessful minor crime, turning up regularly in the magistrate's court to answer charges of burglary and drug dealing, and with any luck, getting off with bonds or community service orders. But the little blue-eyed Irishman from County Fermanagh had a bad luck of living long before soapies or sitcoms, community service orders or stress counselling. He was born in 1793, at a time when stealing half a dozen pairs of shoes, as he did, could be fatal if you were caught, as he was. In 1819, and the 26-year-old was destined for the gallows, or for transportation to Van Diemen's Land, known as Tasmania. Avoiding the gallows for the time being, Pierce arrived in chains in Hobart in 1820. Life in the penal colony was hard, but it could be worse, far worse, as Pierce knew. He was put to work in an open penal camp and then as an assigned servant, where it was easy to abscond and take a refuge in the tavern. Pierce was a lazy, surly man who got into this habit despite the floggings he inevitably got after his drunken hours of freedom. Then he graduated into forging currency and passing the notes off, and when this scheme was discovered, he fled into the bush. He was caught after 2 months hiding in the scrub around Hobart Town and deemed in need of far sterner discipline at a place from which he could not escape, the newly established penal settlement at Macquarie Harbour on the southwest coast of Tasmania, where the Commandant, Lieutenant John Cuthbertson, wrote the standing orders for the jailers. The constant, active, and unremitting employment of every individual in very hard labour is the grand idea and main design. They must dread the very idea of being sent there. Prisoners upon trial declared that they would rather suffer death than be sent back to Macquarie Harbour. It is the feeling that I am anxious to be kept alive. At Macquarie Harbour, Pierce joined convicts who lived and worked on Sarah Island, a 4-hectare island in the middle of Macquarie Harbour. Lived and worked in hell. By day, the lucky ones laboured in the forest on the mainland, the wettest place in Australia, cutting down the huge pines for sale to local boat builders. The unlucky worked in chains underwater, driving piles for the slipways to load the fallen timber. In winter, under dank grey skies and mists, the prisoners were forced to slave 12 hours, and in summer, it was 16 hours. And they did it on a daily ration of 500 grams of brine-cured beef or pork, 2 or 3 years old, 750 grams of bread, and 4 ounces of oatmeal and salt. By night, many of them quivered in agony from the floggings routinely administered for the smallest of infractions, for insolence or rebelliousness, or singing or refusal to work. Prisoners would do anything. They would maim or murder by mutual consent just to escape Macquarie Harbour and be sent to Hobart Town to be tried or as a witness. One man killed just so that he could have a smoke. He was in a group of prisoners in single file when he smashed an axe onto the skull of the man in front. There was no tobacco on Macquarie Harbour, he explained later, and he missed smoking. He had killed so that he would be sent back to Hobart Town, where he could at least have a twist of a niggerhead, shag tobacco before he was dangled. The Hobart Town execution option became so popular that Commandant Cuthbertson decided to institute public hangings at Port Macquarie Harbour. 3 condemned were marched to the gallows, but as Surgeon Barnes reported, their execution produced a feeling, I should say, of the most disgusting description. So buoyant were the feelings of the men who were about to be executed, and so little did they seem to care about it, that they absolutely kicked their shoes off among the crowd in order, as the term expressed by them was, that they might die game, it seemed. More like a parting of friends who were going a distant journey on land than individuals who were about to be separate from each other forever. The expressions used were "goodbye, Bob," and "goodbye, Jack," and expressions of that kind amongst those in the crowd to those who were about to be executed. This was Macquarie Harbour, and Pearce was not impressed. How was Pearce to escape? The Western Hell, they called the Sarah Island settlement, and Hell's Gate, the narrow headlands of the harbour. Escape through Hell's Gates was impossible. For small boats, the turbulent, boiling 100-metre wide bottleneck of rips and currents was impassable. Swimming was suicidal. Around the harbour grew a thick, almost impenetrable bush. No one, the authorities believed, could abscond through the bush. The dubious refuge of Hobart Town was through dense, uncharted wilderness 225 kilometres away, and without a compass, the chance of surviving were nil. But Pearce and the others thought it a chance worth taking. He had been at the Western Hell only a month, when with 6 others, Pearce overpowered the guards on the mainland, jumped into boats, and rowed to a nearby coal works where another convict, Robert Greenhill, was waiting with stolen provisions. They scuttled one of the boats, rowed further down the river in the other, and then started walking east to where they thought Hobart Town lay. There, they planned to steal a schooner and proceed home. This was a representative bunch of reprobate convicts. Matthew Travers, an Irishman under life sentence, and Robert Greenhill, who had been a sailor, had tried to escape from Van Diemen's Land and had been punished by being sent to Macquarie Harbour. There was an ex-soldier, William Dalton, serving 14 years for perjury in Gibraltar. Thomas Bodenham, a highway robber, William Kennelly, alias Bill Cornelius, transported for 7 years and sent to Macquarie Harbour for trying to escape. John Mathers, a young Scottish baker doing 7 years at Macquarie Harbour for forging a £15 money order, and a man now remembered only as William Little Brown. Ahead of the group was some of the most rugged country in the world, mile after mile of mountainous, steep rock faces and rotting ferns and creepers that make it impossible to keep a straight line. They struggled along from dawn to dusk, taking it in turns to head the file and hack a path. Little Brown, Pearce related, was the worst walker of any. He always fell behind and then kept cooing, so that we said we would leave him behind if he could not keep up the better. Between them, the 8 had 10 pounds of flour and 6 pounds of beef, and other than the convicts' uniforms they stood in, no protection against the bitter cold and endless driving rain. For a week it poured with rain, a heavy, drenching rain, and then it turned into gales and sleet. They could not build a fire, their tinder was soaked and useless, and by the 9th day they had eaten their rations. They went another 2 days before Kennelly voiced what they had probably all been thinking. "I am so weak I could eat a piece of a man." No doubt Kennelly said this as if he meant it to be a weak joke, but the others brooded on it overnight, and Pierce tells. The next morning, there were 4 of us for a feast. Bob Greenhill was the first who introduced it, and he said he had seen the like done before, and that he'd eat much like pork. Mather spoke out and said it would be murder, and perhaps then we could not eat it. I'll warrant you, said Greenhill. I'll eat the first bit, but you must all lend a hand, so that we'll all be equal in the crime. We consulted who should fall, and Greenhill said, Dalton. He volunteered to be a flogger. We will kill him. We made it a bit of a breakwind with bows, and about 3 in the morning Dalton was asleep. Then Greenhill struck him on the head with an axe, and he never spoke again. Greenhill called Travers, and he cut Dalton's throat to bleed him. Then we dragged him away a bit and cut him up. They cut off the head and tore into the torso, too impatient to observe the niceties. Travers and Greenhill put his heart and liver on the fire and ate them before they were right warm. The others refused to eat, any that night, but the next morning it was cut up and divided, and we all got our share. Brown was walking slower and slower. He was a liability. He knew he was bound to be next. Kennelly, too, was frightened, and the pair fell behind until they had disappeared, slipped away to retrace their steps. They made it to Macquarie Harbour on the 12th of October, almost a month since their escape. But they were done in. Brown died on 15 October and Kennelly 3 days later. 5 convicts were now left. Pierce, Greenhill, Bodenham, Travers and Mathers were lost, with no idea where they were or how far from Hobart Town. On the day that Brown died, it was Bodenham's turn to feed his companions. Greenhill poleaxed him with a sharp, violent blow to the back of the head, and Bodenham was dismembered, cut into smaller pieces, cooked and eaten. For the next week, the 4 ate while they stumbled and staggered through the bush. They covered only 3 or 4 miles a day. When exhausted and despairing, they reached a small valley, a very fine country full of many kangaroos and emus and game of all sorts. But they had no weapons and watched in mounting frustration as their meals bounded beyond their reach. So it was John Mather's turn. The 5 stopped by a little creek to boil the last of Bodenham, but Mather... Yep, could you just wait until I finish my book, please? But Mather, who had been squeamish from the beginning, could not eat his share. He gathered some fern roots and boiled them, but he found it would not rest on his stomach, which occasioned him to vomit to ease his stomach. And while in the act of discharging it from his chest, Greenhill, still showing his spontaneous habit of bloodshed, seized the axe and crept up behind him and gave him a blow on the head. Mathers spun up and around, grappled with Greenhill, and stronger than him, came away panting and wild-eyed, holding the axe. The others stepped back. Pierce and Travers slowly calmed the other 2, but all 4 knew it could not last. It was a standoff, and Mathers now had the killing tool. For safety, they split in 2s. Mathers sided with Pierce, and Greenhill went with Travers, and the 2 pairs eyed each other warily across the campfire. They took turns sleeping on the understanding that their partner would guard them. Mathers made a poor choice in his partner. Pierce was secretly on the other side. We walked on till night, and then Travers and Greenhill collared Mathers and got him down. They told him they would give him half an hour to pray for himself, which was agreed to. He then gave the prayer book to me and laid down his head, and Greenhill took the axe and killed him. Now there were 3. They had the remains of Mathers to keep them going, but human flesh, rich in protein, is lacking in carbohydrates that gave energy, and they needed energy badly. 4 days later, when a snake bit Travers' foot, he knew his time was up. His legs swollen to enormous proportions, he begged to be allowed to die peacefully and for the others to leave him there. Greenhill, the axeman, assured him he would not desert his mate. He would stay with him in the hope that Travers might rally and survive. And with Pierce, he did stay until 6 days later, Greenhill's patience ran out, and he killed Travers with the now standard single blow from the axe. Travers only stretched himself in his agony and then expired. 1 to go. They walked apart. When one stopped, the other stopped. When one squatted, so did the other. Greenhill never let go of the axe. Neither man slept. Finally, near dawn one morning, when Greenhill fell asleep at last, Pierce stealthily slid alongside, slipped the axe from his hand, and dispatched him with a number of blows to the head. I then took part of his arm and thigh and went on for several days. Greenhill's part in the awful odyssey had been crucial. He had done the killings, but he had also taken the party, using his sailor skills to navigate by the stars and the sun almost directly due east across the island to the settled area. Without him, they would certainly have wandered in aimless circles. For the first time in almost 7 weeks, Alexander Pierce was able to eat without fear. For the next 4 days, he settled down to recuperate while he feasted on Greenhill. Then the first of a series of good luck occurred. Pierce stumbled into an Aboriginal camp. The tribe had been cooking when they saw him coming and fled at the apparition of this wild, bearded white man. There was kangaroo and possum on the campfire, and he ate all he could and took the rest. A week later, he came across 2 ducks, strangled them, and ate them raw. When he blundered onto some stray sheep in the bush and cornered and killed a lamb, he knew he was near a farm. This was confirmed when he heard a dog barking as he was enjoying the lamb, and turning round, found himself looking along the barrel of a musket. Pierce told Tom Triffitt, the man with the musket, a shepherd, that the wild, near-naked white man he saw before him, tearing into an uncooked lamb, was a convict, an escapee from the penal settlement on the other side of the island. Incredibly, he learned, in return, he had made it to the outskirts of Hobart Town, much of it barefoot. He didn't tell Tom Triffitt about the cannibalism. Triffitt might not have been inclined to take Pierce back to his hut. Instead, Triffitt took him into his hut. He wouldn't turn in a fellow Irishman, and for 11 days, while the benevolent Triffitt fed him and nursed him back to good health, and for several weeks afterwards, while he stayed with the other Irish shepherds, Alexander Pierce enjoyed the only peaceful period of his life since he was found with 6 pairs of stolen shoes 4 long years before. One day when Triffitt was away from the hut, there came a knock on the door. Opening it, Pierce was confronted by 2 bushrangers, Ralph Cheetham and William Davis. Like Pierce, escaped convicts, the 3 swapped yarns, and in no time at all, Pierce had accepted their offer to join them. The little Irishman's talent for immersing himself ever deeper into his living nightmare was about to be reinvigorated, and his taste for cannibalism, and now it was truly a taste, was to be revived. Pierce left Triffitt a note thanking him for his kindness, and the trio disappeared into the dense bush forest. Their hideout was well concealed and well provided with arms and food. A flock of 180 stolen sheep grazed around 2 huts. It was the Yuletide season, and the bushrangers, whether or not they were aware of it, celebrated Christmas Day with the customary roast lamb. It couldn't last, and less than 6 weeks later, it was all up for them. There was a £10 reward on the head of his companions, and on the 11th of January 1823, the 48th Regiment of Troopers, who had been ordered to rid Van Diemen's Land of the growing bands of bushrangers, surrounded the camp after tip-off and took Pierce and Cheetham without any resistance. Davis tried to shoot his way to freedom, but was cut down and, like the others, taken in chains into Hobart Town, where 7 weeks later, in March 1823, Davis and Cheetham dangled from the gallows. Incredibly, Pierce, the great survivor, didn't join them. He was not tried for bushranging, but instead found himself returned to Macquarie Harbour, where the prisoners lauded him as a hero. More so when Pierce told the full story. He admitted to murdering Robert Greenhill and being a party to the murder of Dalton, Bodenham, Mathers, and Travers, and he confessed that he had dined off all of them. Getting darker and darker. It was, as it were, a deliciously macabre story, but the authorities wouldn't wear it. They had no doubt that Pierce was concocting this tale of culinary adventures simply to protect the missing convicts. They were undoubtedly still in hiding, but would inevitably be flushed out and suitably punished. In the meantime, Pierce was flogged, of course, and put in solitary confinement, mild punishment by the standards of the Western hell, and one quite enjoyed by prisoners. He had escaped the noose and was not even given an additional year or 2 on his sentence. He had now by served 3 years minus the 113 days he had absconded of his 7-year sentence. Now all Pierce had to do was to keep his head down and stay out of trouble while he served the remainder of his sentence. With any luck, he would eventually be freed to roister in the taverns of Hobart Town or grow old back in the Emerald Isle where he could terrify his grandchildren with tales of life in Van Diemen's Land. Naturally, Pierce chose the other path. He escaped from Macquarie Harbour once more. This time he had only one companion, Thomas Cox, a young Shropshire lad. He had been transported in 1819, the year that Pierce was sentenced at the Armagh Assizes. Like the other convicts, Cox hero worshipped Cannibal Pierce as the man who had proved it was possible to escape from Macquarie Harbour and get to Hobart Town. But perhaps, like the penal authorities, Cox didn't really believe that Pierce ate the flesh of men. If so, he fatally deluded himself. 5 days after the pair took to the bush, the schooner Waterloo, cruising down Macquarie Harbour, saw smoke signals rising and a figure on the shore waving to alert them, and rowing ashore they were met by a man who needed no introduction, Alexander Cannibal Pierce. This time Pierce's story was simple. Cox had drowned, he said, trying to swim a river. He wanted to surrender. Then he was searched. In his packets they found enough food to keep him going for days. But in one pocket they found raw meat, human flesh. It was true then. Cannibal Pierce was true to his nickname. Now Pierce gave up all pretense. A short distance away in the scrub they found Cox's body, and Pierce readily agreed, oh sorry Stevie, you scared me, that he had killed Cox. And I am willing to die for it. Yeah, come around this side. And I am willing to die for it. It seemed that the pair... Stevie, I'm nearly finished. Don't touch. It seemed that the pair had been about to cross a river when Cox revealed that he couldn't swim. Pierce was furious, and a violent argument was settled when Pierce picked up, once again, an axe and cut Cox down. Then, he later told the court in Hobart Town, he was overcome with the compulsion to feast on human flesh. I ate part of him that night and cut up the greater part of his flesh in order to take it with me, he confessed. By now, Pierce was clearly demented, but not so much that his conscience couldn't be tortured by his grotesque crimes. He said he had signalled the Waterloo as a way of ending them. The court obliged, and on 20 June 1824, on a bitterly cold day in Hobart Town, with snow on Mount Wellington, the Chief Justice, John Pedder, sentenced Pierce to hang. Alexander Pierce was a cannibal with a conscience and a taste for eating others. On the morning of his death, he left posterity to ponder his answer to Coxswain Smith of Macquarie Harbour. In the yard of the Hobart Town Jail at 9 a.m. on 19th July, Smith asked Pierce what drove him to eat another. Pierce replied, "No man can tell what he will do when driven by hunger." And then he added, "Man's flesh is delicious, far better than fish or pork." There you go. That is the first part of Cannibal Convicts and the Monsters Who Made Them. Alexander Cannibal Pierce. What a story. What a yarn. Ladies and gentlemen, what a yarn. Next yarn by the campfire will be And for Afters. You'll probably get two the next time, and the next one will also be And for Afters and Slaughter on Vinegar Hill. I would read And for Afters now, but I've lost the light and I cannot see the pages anymore. I will leave you to enjoy the fire for a brief moment, and then I'll come back to you. Thanks for tuning in to this week's Yarns by the Campfire Live. I appreciate it. And we'll see you next live. It'll be scheduled, I'm hoping, next Thursday. If we're able to have a fire, we're absolutely having one. Sorry about last week. State of Origin got the best of me the night before, and I was feeling it rough all of Thursday. But I enjoyed that story. Alexander Cannibal Pierce. What an animal. Anyway, legends, as always, thanks for tuning in, and hooroo.